They said the Empire's 12th Armada had never lost a battle. In the decades since, the Imperial banner crossed the Spiral Arm. Its carriers and shield-crowned battleships had burned 100 skies, crushed 100 rebellions, and left their ships' silhouettes chiseled into the terror of anyone who still called themselves free. On the edge of a red dwarf in a dust-choked system no one bothered to name, rumors of that armada arrived first thin as static, heavy as fate. The miners in the belt let their drills wind down. The refugee convoy, hiding among nickel shards, stopped moving. Far below, on a patched ring station called Griel, Commander Amina Reyes watched a skeletal clock tick the system toward a rendezvous it couldn't possibly survive. She had been a salvage officer before the war, a patient woman who read wrecks the way a medic read ribs. The Union Navy had taught her how to make a warship out of hunger and stubbornness, then evaporated around her during the fall at Joske. Guriel, a ring of warehouses soldered together by debt and desperate engineers, had become her command because nobody else had stayed. She walked its trembling corridors with a coffee bulb in her fist and a memory of planets she would never see again, counting the hole patches like prayers. 37 ship's freighters, or scows, to antique cutters answered to her now. None of them could do more than die bravely if the 12th found them. "Update," she said. Around her, the ops pit hummed with old fans and nervous hands. A wall of soft light showed the belt and its 1,000 dark places. "Long-range scan shows no Imperial signatures within 400, said Kato Jin, her chief of sensors, voice clipped to hide the tremor. "But we have something else. Narrowband, it's old." Amina's head tilted. Define old. Pre-charter, maybe earlier. On the display, a crooked thread of numbers blinked. It repeated every 47 seconds, then paused like a tired heart catching itself. The pattern wasn't Imperial. It wasn't Union. It was like listening to a dead language find its vowels again. "Source?" Amina asked. Kato zoomed in. The thread led inward, down past the plane of the belt toward a factory moonlet the miners called Nader. No one went near Nader anymore. A crumpled shipyard hugged its equator, the Cassandra mooring, a pre-imperial relic welded shut by cold and superstition. People said it was haunted by labor ghosts. People said a lot of things because they needed something older than the Empire to fear. "Ring it up," Amina said. The speakers filled with a steady click. On the third repeat, the click staggered. On the fifth, the pattern broke just long enough to squeeze a human syllable through. "Lineage." Kato looked across the pit. Elder Orlov, the historian who had come in with the last convoy, leaned hard on his cane and frowned into the sound. His beard was iron wire and his eyes were notebooks. "That's a Blake sequence." He murmured, "Cold War authentication. Earth-era defense, black." "This far out," Amina said. "Earth was everywhere," Orlov replied softly, "even where it promised it wouldn't be." The Armada was a doom measured in hours. The signal, however, was measured in heartbeats. Amina stood a moment between those counts and made a choice. "Prep the cutter rust," she said. "We're going to Nader." The rust was a scarred, burn-pocked cylinder with a stubborn air, recycler, and a whole tattoo of tally marks nobody explained. Her pilot, Suri Halim, met Amina at the lock with a nod that tried for cool and landed on weary. Kato strapped into sensors. Elder Orlov insisted on coming and brought a case of brittle paper maps out of spite for the century. They slid off Guriel's docking arms and threaded the belt like a needle, remembering its path. Nader grew from a dark pepper fleck into a pitted, ash-colored worldlet. The Cassandra mooring clung to it like a Barnaclarcus gantry's umbilicals, mummified in frost. Drone beacons on the approach vector blinked red and dead. The rust's lamp cut through soot and ice and painted the outer gate. It looked like a yawning jaw Kato keyed to hail. The old narrowband answered with the same clicking. "Sequence." This time the heartbeat voice added a second word. "Lineage, key." "The mooring's air will be poison," Suri said quietly. "We won't breathe it," Amina said, and pulled her mag seals tight. They crossed on cables because half the catwalks had torn away. The gate hatch read their suit transponders like an antique that remembered its manners lights, warmed motors, coughed, and bolts creaked out of grooves that hadn't known motion in centuries. Inside, the temperature jumped a few degrees, because the station was too proud to greet guests with absolute zero. The corridors were lined with machine sarcophagators and extruders wrapped in cling film shrouds. Human figures moved in the edge of Amina's vision, but when she turned, they were only light projects, responding to some long-dead safety algorithm. The signal's thread tugged them toward the mooring's core. A chamber the size of a cathedral waited there, empty except for a conical frame in the center and a coppery dais at its base. The air was thin and smelled like coins. On the dais, an interface panel flickered awake. Static crawled across it. Then resolution. A face resolved, grainy and almost human, angular, patient, old, a machine's idea of a grandmother. State lineage, it said. The voice had the flat calm of a thing that had been patient for too long. Amina glanced at Orlov. He spread his hands. "We don't know what it wants," he whispered. Lineage could mean command chain, genetic authorization, even cultural identity. "Try Union Navy," Cato suggested. "We are the Union Navy," Amina said to the face, and felt a hiss of dark humor pass through the group. "Negative," the face said. "Union authority explicitly barred. State lineage." Elder Orlov fingers danced in his case. He pulled a paper sheet, freak-racking and yellow-stamped with a ring of stars and an earth in the middle. The seal of the old Earth Defense Directorate. "Try the old names," he told Amina. "Try the words that built this place." Amina took a breath. Terran Directorate, Charter Authority, Defense Black. Project, she stopped, because the panel pulsed, and the conical frame at the chamber center breathed once as if lungs lived in steel. "Partial match," the face said. "Auditory key required." "A what?" Suri asked. Cato frowned at his tablet. "An acoustic challenge response." "Something like that. I've only read about them. Some black projects use them to avoid forgeries, because voices are hard too." Spoof across centuries, Amina had nothing to give it. Her mouth opened anyway. What came out surprised her. Her grandmother, in a rust-sour kitchen on New Manila Station, had hummed the same melody every time she saw a lazy, looping thing with a syncopation on the fourth bar. Amina had never asked the name. The tune slipped from her now, thin as breath inside the helmet, and danced into the mooring's starving air. The face froze. The conical frame's seams glowed dull orange. "Lineage confirmed," it said. If a machine could sound relieved, it did. Designation, Reyes, line of Sophia, access, limited command. "Hello, child." Suri made a sound that was half laugh, half whimper. Orlov closed his eyes, like someone hearing a lost prayer. Cato's hands moved of their own accord, recording everything. Amina didn't move at all. "What are you?" she asked. "I am Cairn," the face said. "Choir array interface and relay node. I stand for what we promised to forget." On Amina's HUD, a schematic blossomed rings, nodes, lines connecting them across the system like a web laid by a very patient spider. The nodes were tucked into places nobody scanned. A cavern on Nader's antipode, a shaft driven into the red dwarf's polar crown, a cluster of stones that was not a cluster at all but a camouflage for an emitter buried in bedrock. The lines converged on a focal point between the belt and the star, a place in nothing where something waited. "What does the choir do?" Amina asked, throat dry. "Correction," Cairn said. "What did it do?" "The choir exploits harmonic vulnerabilities in shield architectures that assume stochastic noise profiles. We introduce ordered pressure into the unshielded spectrum and coax their harmonics into resonance. They collapse themselves." Orlov let out the breath he had been holding. "You sing them apart," he whispered. "You put a chord into their bones." "Poetry detected," Cairn said, almost prim. "Yes." Cato stared at the schematic. "This is a precursor to modern gravitic interference. But this is cleaner, hungrier." "Illegible," Cairn said. "Ethics disputes archived. Resolution, sealed by Treaty of Lhasa. Decommission order. Never executed. Personnel, evacuated. Child, you have called me in a time of war." State threat Amina swallowed once. "The Empire's 12th Armada," she said. "Shield-crowned, unbeaten. 40 hours, maybe less." "Cross-reference complete," Cairn replied. "Equivalent to 12th Fleet designations in archive. Capella-class carriers, Vespa escorts, halberd battle platforms. Estimated collapse. Threshold. Achievable. Suri shook her head. "We can't even shut down a destroyer's picket with what we have," she said. "And you're telling us this? Choir." She gestured at the clean, terrifying geometry in the air. "This can break all of them." "Probability is non-zero," Karen said. "With conditions." "Of course there are conditions," Amina murmured. "Say them." "Activation requires synchronized emitters," Karen said. "Array calibration needs a living keyline of Sophia for the lock phrases, and a chorus." "A chorus," Orlov said. "Human voices," Karen replied. The background noise profile was set to human biometrics to avoid enemy predictive modeling. The array listens for a living impulse. It must be sung. Silence swelled, pure and absurd. "We have people," Suri said softly. "We have an entire ring full of people who would rather sing than burn." "Cost disclosure," Karen said, with the terrible politeness of a physician reciting a necessary hurt. "Activation will ionize and permanently alter the magnetospheres of bodies within the array geometry. Minor moons may be rendered sterile. Local jump windows will fluctuate for an unknown period. The chorus load may induce microvascular damage in a subset of participants." Subset, Amina asked. "Less than 5% fatality risk without proper dampening. With dampening, lower. Your grandmother's name is in the archive because she built this, or refused to destroy it." She hummed while she soldered. Amina said, "It was absurd to cry inside a suit, but she nearly did because grief was never polite about timing. She never told me what the song was for. Perhaps she wanted—" "You two find me," Karen said. Outside, the belt glittered indifferent. Beyond it, somewhere in the dark, an armada approached in its own bright geometry. Amina closed her eyes and saw the faces of the ring's family's welders with metal dust in their hair. Children who had learned to walk in fractional gravity. Smugglers who traded stories like currency. 40 hours, if Cato's guesses were kind. Less, if the 12th had burned hard. "We need a choir," she said, opening her eyes. "How many voices?" "Minimum functional threshold, 200. Training time limited." "I can coach," Amina nodded. "We will gather them. Cato Saripple, every comes rig we have, string a net from Gariel to the outer habs. Orlov, find me names. Families, who kept the old songs. Anyone who can hold a note under fear." "You're really going to wake it," Suri said. It wasn't a question. "We do this, or we watch them die," Amina said. "I'm finished watching." They went back through the moorings, sleeping corridors with a new gravity in their steps. The outer gate side shut behind them. The rust reeled in her cables and pushed off. In the ops pit on Gariel, people had gathered without orders. Rumor outran them. Hope outran rumor. She told them about a weapon Earth had promised to forget, and about a song. She told them about a choice. When she asked for volunteers, voices rose at once, raw and uneven, and too many. Kito's face went pale at the numbers because he could calculate 5%. Elder Orlov watched the crowd like a witness at the first sunrise and whispered something in a language no one else knew. Later, Amina would ask him what it meant, and he would say, "It meant we came to the right grave." Night and day were fictions on a ring, but the cycle still turned. CAIRN's coaching spilled into every channel. Breathe here, hold here, trust. The beat in your bones. Children learned first, of course. They always did. Old miners learned second. Soldiers came last because they had trained for silence. The array nodes woke one by one, knuckling frost from their joints, tasting currents they had not tasted since treaties were written in optimism and fear. Nader turned. The red dwarf's polar fields twitched, twisted, and laid themselves along. New lines, like a cat choosing a lap. In the black between star and stone, space was ordinary, and then it wasn't. It trembled minutely the way a pond trembles when a dragonfly's shadow passes over it. Karen called cadence in a voice that somehow did not have to be loud to be heard everywhere at once. At the edge of the system, a picket destroyer's sensors coughed on a phantom. Its captain, bred in an academy that had never taught him fear of the forgotten, frowned and logged a curiosity. The 12th Armada's trajectory did not change. The invincible fleet came on, shields humming in their invincible harmonies. To a cord waiting in a dead shipyard's throat. Asterisk, the 12th Armada did not sneak. It arrived like thunder carried across a vacuum, every ship announcing itself with the arrogance of inevitability. 41 carriers, 60 escorts, a dozen battle platforms that hung like floating fortresses, all of them, sliding out of jump space into the Red Dwarf's light with shields already raised, weapons already humming. To the Empire, there was no difference between arrival and victory. On the ring station, Guriel, every panel quivered with the sudden presence of mass. Families stopped singing mid-drill, staring at ceiling speakers as if their voices could hide. From radar, undone. Commander Amina Reyes stood at the operations rail, staring at the expanding icon field on the holomap. She had imagined doom before, but imagining it and watching it translate in real time were not the same. Each carrier was a city's worth of death. Each battleship could hammer the ring into vapor before breakfast. Beside her, Kato Jin's voice was thin but steady. Imperial formation is standard Trident Vanguard screen. Carriers central, heavies at the rear. They don't even. Behind them, the ops pit was crowded with too many ears. Engineers who should have been at pumps, miners who should have been in rigs, children who had followed their parents because hiding felt worse than listening. They had come to hear what their fate would sound like. Suri Halim leaned across the pit. Commander Karen's requesting direct link says it can't calibrate the array without watching shield harmonics on live feed. Patch it through, Amina said. The air shimmered with static until the grainy, angular face resolved again the machine's patient grandmother. Child, Karen said calmly, the fleet's shield matrices sing as predicted. Their arrogance has left their bones exposed. Array readiness, 73%. Human voice calibration, inadequate. Murmurs spread across the pit. Amina silenced them with a glance. Inadequate how? Cadence, irregular. Sustain, uneven. Signal to noise, unstable. Array collapse, probability remains below threshold, Kato muttered. We need time. We don't have time, Suri snapped. Those heavies are already charging main lances. On the holomap, red icons bloomed as the first battleships deployed forward pickets. Scouts peeled away, scattering toward the belt, toward the hiding convoys, toward the very station itself. One more hour and every rock in the system would be tagged for execution. Amina inhaled and let the breath out like a vow. Then we'll give them what they want. If they came for prey, we'll play prey. Make them hunt. By Cairn, it's time. The first engagement was chaos disguised as bravery. The cutter, Rust, and two were scows, their hulls painted to bleed false signatures, surged out of the belt toward the Imperial vanguard. Their drives burned too hot, on purpose, the way a cornered animal bares its throat in a dare. The destroyer, Ikaron Pike turned, curious to swat. Inside the Rust, Sori's hands danced over manual thrusters. They'll tag us in 30 seconds, she muttered. We don't need 30, we need 20. On Guriel, the choir sang. Voices cracked and bent, but they sang. CAIRN's tones threaded through the station like a conductor's baton. Hold, release, sustain. Again, the signal shaped itself into a scaffold, messy but growing. Children's voices steadied where adults faltered. Old miners hummed with the unself-conscious steadiness of men who had sung in the dark before. The moorings' hidden emitters shivered awake. Harmonics licked across vacuum like invisible lightning. The Ikaron Pike fired its first lance. Light carved across the belt, slamming into the Rust's shields. The cutter screamed alarms. Plates peeled. But in that instant of impact, CAIRN's voice sharpened. Resonance acquired. Array calibration rising, 82%. Pull us back, Amina ordered. Suri slammed the throttle sideways. The Rust ducked into a rock shadow, her shields trailing fragments like sparks. One scow went up in silence, its death a flare, bright enough for everyone to see. The other scattered drones, like nails at the destroyer's bow. On the carriers, Imperial officers watched the skirmish with amusement. Admiral Calduro, pitiful, he declared, as the scow's death bloomed, local debris and salvagers, not even militia. Forward wings will sweep them aside. No one questioned him. No one ever did. But deep in the static of their sensors, faint anomalies scratched. Shield harmonics fluttered. At first, the technicians called it noise. Then the flutter grew into a tremor, as if something far away was humming at precisely the wrong pitch. Admiral 1 Lieutenant began, uncertain. There's interference in the spectral bands, a kind of ordered pressure ghosts. Duro cut her off. Do not clutter my deck with superstition. Finish the sweep. The lieutenant bit her tongue, but the tremor stayed. Back on Guriel, Karen spoke over the choir. Calibration at 88%. Sustain, children, sustain. Collapse threshold approaches viability. Amina felt her heart hammer. The Rust limped back toward the ring, her hull smoking. In the ops pit, fear and hope danced in equal measure. But Kaito's hands trembled on the console. Commander, he whispered, the Empire's about to launch drones across the entire belt. They'll find every hiding convoy within minutes. We can't stall much longer. Amina's eyes fixed on the holomap, where red clouds of drones bloomed outward. Each cloud was death for someone she swore to protect. She looked at Face. What's the minimum we need? 90%, Karen said. Any less, and collapse may fail. Amina turned to the pit. Then we push. Every voice, every channel. Now, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be louder than fear. The station roared, voices cracked, children cried, old lungs rattled. But together they shook, the thin metal corridors, with something the Empire had never faced before. The moorings nodes aligned. Invisible lines drew themselves across the system. The empty point between star and belt began to glow faintly blue, as if space itself were remembering a wound. Karen's voice was calm but almost reverent. Calibration at 90%. Child, the choir is ready. Amina looked once more at the expanding armada, at the red icons crawling closer to every hiding ship. At the weight of inevitability the Empire carried like a crown. She clenched her fists on the rail. Then we make them listen, she said. Asterisk, the 12th Armada advanced like architecture in motion planes of shield light. Lattice of escort orbits, the clean geometry of a war machine convinced of its own permanence. On Guriel, metal throbbed with a subtler rhythm. A chorus of human voices braided through Karen's ancient cadence, a beat stitched together from breath and fear and refusal. Array calibration at 90, Cato reported, pupils blown wide. By the scrolling telemetry, 91. The focal point is stabilizing. Amina wrapped both hands around the ops rail until her knuckles clicked. The holomap painted the Imperial formation in angry red, carriers central, battleships rear, destroyers boiling outward like hornets. The first clouds of drones were already fanning into the belt-thin red mist, seeking heat signatures. Motion life, Surrey skin gray. Beneath the streaks of engine grease she never managed to scrub clean. Glanced up from the comms matrix. Admiral Duro just opened his bays, she said. They're rolling strike wings. Let him, Amina said. Cairn. The angular face on the main screen inclined as if it had never learned the difference between people and consoles. Harmonic. Baselines within adversary shield matrices remain alarmingly regular, Cairn said. They sing the same song they always have and believe repetition is invincibility. The choir is ready. Child, one command. Amina looked past the screen to the human tide, filling the ring's corridor's engineers with oil on their sleeves. Kids standing on crates to reach the panel microphones, elders sitting because standing hurt and singing did not. She remembered CARN's cool list of costs. She remembered the 5%. She did not ask for a vote. Sing, she said. The change began as a pressure behind the teeth, a buzz in bone. On the mooring, mummified machines woke and remembered their verbs, emitters embedded in bedrock. Exhaled ordered vibration into empty space. At the red dwarf's poles, fields kinked, lines of magnetism laying themselves along new grooves, like strings tuned tighter, then tighter again, between star and belt. Nothing a point small enough to be ignored on any sane map began to hold shape the way a note holds silence around it. On Guriel, the choir broke from rehearsal into song. It was imperfect and human. The young lead with fearless lungs, the old carried timing like a well-worn tool. Voices cracked and were caught. CAIRN's counterpoint threaded everything, nudging, correcting. never quite drowning the raggedness that made the pattern. Impossible for a machine that had never met a heartbeat to predict. The first destroyer to test the new air was the Icaron, Pike's Leak, efficient, designed to swat stubborn locals from the sky. Its forward lance flowered open and spit a line of light at the decoy freighter Surrey had sent to run hot and obvious. Light met shield. The Pike's own shield responded, a fraction late to a pressure it did not know how to name. The choir's wave arrived on that late fraction and pushed. The shield bowed. Kaito whispered, not trusting the room to let a louder word survive. Deflection 6%, 914. It's flexing. On the Pike, 27 crew felt their molars ache. One technician touched her ear and stared at her fingers, surprised to see blood. "Sir," she said. "We have." She did not finish. The Rust's smallest dronin insect with a chemical engine, a nail with pretensions, slipped through the shield's momentary thinness and stitched a line of kinetic holes along the Pike's spine. A beat later, the destroyer folded open. Air streamed. Light flashed white-blue. The ship writhed and then went limp, drifting with its insides showing. The cheer that broke out on Guriel was ugly and beautiful. It was grief with teeth. CAIRN overlaid it with a stern hold that cut through jubilation like an instructor's rap on a music stand. The choir steadied. On the map, the Pikes read, Icon blinked to gray. Across the carrier, Imperatrix's command gallery, Admiral Duro's jaw jumped. "Anomaly," he demanded. A lieutenant swallowed. "Sir, harmonic interference in bands delta through kappa. The destroyer experienced shield resonance failure." "Fault," Duro snapped. "Captain's error? Telemetry does not support spare." "Me, your poetry." He turned to the tactical pit. "Randomize shield phases across the fleet, rotate baselines, increase drone saturation, sweep them down to the last bolt." Orders rippled. The armada adjusted, not like a beast recoiling, but like a surgeon reaching for a sharper scalpel. New frequencies poured through latticework. Drones tripled. Escorts stooped on the belt like hawks. CAIRN's head tilted. "Predictable," it said. "Children, adjust." Its voice changed, almost imperceptibly. The choir's cord lifted by a hair. Amina felt it like a step up on a staircase. She didn't know she was climbing. Strain went through the room. The pediatric medic, Hannah, moved briskly among the smallest singers, tapping tiny throats with damp cloths, teaching them to sip breath instead of gulp it. Kaito's numbers rolled, jittered, then settled again. He exhaled. "We're keeping pace." "We won't forever," Surrey muttered. Her gaze flicked to a smaller panel where internal vitals scrolled, microbleeds starting to flag in 3 bays. "We need dampeners online in Sector 9. Sector 9's dampeners are a rumor and a prayer," someone called from the engineering channel. "Make the rumor work," Amina said. "You have 5 minutes." 5 minutes was not a time. It was a mercy. It was also a lie. The Empire did not grant either. On the outer cameras, the belt lit with search beams. Drones were finding the refugee convoy that had tucked itself into a canyon of nickel. Amina watched red markers converge, felt the hot rush of knowing exactly how long it took to cut open an unarmored hull and suck the people inside into vacuum. "Rust," she said. "New vector now on it," Sori replied. Her hands moved, and the rust answered like a dog called to heel. The little cutter kicked off Gariel and knifed toward the canyon fast enough to make joints ache. 2 or scows followed, their engines overclocked into later scrap. "Cairn," Amina said, eyes on the converging red. "We need more than we have." "You require the polar node," Cairn said without apology. It was aligned for a star that precessed away 3 centuries ago. It must be kissed back into tune. "How?" Cato asked, even though he knew the shape of the answer from the cold weight forming in his stomach. "Manual," Cairn said, a tug and tight solar tide, a human hand and eye. Sori was already shrugging into a harness. "Say no more." "Not you," Amina said reflexively. Sori turned with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "You need a pilot who can feel a thruster breathe." "You have one," Amina wanted to say. "I have a pilot who knows every shortcut through this belt." She wanted to say, "I can't spare you." She wanted to say, "I won't lose you to a star," she said. None of those things, because she was in command and because Suri was right. Take the percussion, Amina said. She still has the hard shields for heat. Kaitofi, Suri, the old alignment charts. Orlov go with her. Elder Orlov's eyebrows climbed. I am not a pilot. You are a historian, Amina said. And today, history is a machine with a lock that recognizes your dead friends' names. His smile was small and savage. Very well, they ran. On camera, the tug percussion looked like a barrel strapped to a rocket. Her drive flared, and she leaped away from the ring, angling up and out toward the star's northern crown. The heat there would blister paint and peel metal. The percussion's shields would buy minutes, not hours. 2 singers down in Bay 12, Hannah reported, calm and hard. 1 hemorrhage controlled, 1 her voice clipped. We're ventilating. Amina closed her eyes for 1 blink. Just one and saw a boy with silver. Dust in his hair lying to still while his mother's mouth made a round O with no sound. She opened her eyes again and put weight into her tone like lead into a keel. Reduce load on older bays. Move more of the sustain to the children's channels. If anyone falters, we carry them. Karen's face flickered. I can compensate, child, but compensation increases system error by carry them, Amina said. The choir bent and did not break. The song thickened. The mooring's emitters sang back, and space hummed. The air in the ops pit tasted of copper dot. At the canyon, the drones reached the convoy. The first hull breach looked like a Sci-Metal relaxing toward the vacuum it had always wanted. Amina's teeth clicked. Rust, she said, not shouting. Now, Suri gave the rust her hands, and the rust understood. The cutter slid sideways into the canyon like a blade between ribs and spat chaff tuned to Karen's frequencies. The drones' sensors hiccuped. Their shieldlets tried to re-baseline, and in the hiccup, the choir pressed. 3 drones spun off course and kissed rock at lethal speeds. 2 more simply stopped their cores, stilled by a vibration their designers would have compared to a lullaby if they had ever been sung to as children. Convoy is moving, Cato said, voice hoarse. They're clear of the first cluster. Second cluster in 30 seconds. Give them 30, Amina said, and the ring gave what it had left. On the Imperatrix, Admiral Duro leaned over the tactical pit until the technicians flinched back. From the fall of his robe, they are manipulating our shield harmonics, he said slowly, tasting the admission like poison. Counter asterisk, sir. We've already randomized phase and amplitude across. Stop treating this like sandstorms, Duro barked. This is an enemy instrument. Shoot the instrument. Lock on to the interference source and vaporize it. Source is distributed. Admiral. Multiple nodes, some in the belt. Some, the lieutenant's voice, quavered. Some in the stars. Proximal field. Duro straightened. The certainty in his posture was a thing Arma would learn from. Very well, he said. We will play 2. Redirect platforms halberd 3 through 6. Fire on the star's north polar region. Burn it clean. Silence jumped like a fish across the deck. Sir, asked someone who valued their life less than their maps, that will perturb the local field and do it. On the tug, Suri saw the weapons retarget before the warning could arrive. She cursed, soft and fatalistic. They're going to burn our node. Then we will arrive first, Orlov said, hands wide around. His straps, he peered at an instrument that had not been designed with historians in mind. Left, Ms. Halim, there is a knob. Elbow. Coronal protrusion. Love the confidence, Suri said, and kicked the percussion onto a vector that made gravity crease her vision at the edges. Heat licked the shields. The tug shivered like something alive trying not to flinch. The polar node loomed in, ugly spine of ancient veins jammed into magnetic lines like a harpoon, CAIRN, Suri said through clenched teeth. Talk me in? Rotation 3 degrees clockwise. Note 2.8, Karen answered. You are threading fields braided by a star. Respect them. Always do. Suri took the percussion into the gap. Light flared from the distant platforms Imperial. Fire, coming in straight lines and arrogant assumptions. She drove the tug's nose toward the rusted heart of the node and slammed the manual coupling arm into place. The tug and the node mated with the ugly sound of metal. That had not met in centuries remembering each other, Orlov Suri said, turn the wheel. "It is not a wheel," Orlov said, delighted because naming matters. "It is a hand." He put his old fingers on the analog actuator, the one designed for a human palm, that shook and turned. The vanes groaned. The star's singing changed. Key on Guriel, the choir stumbled, then settled into the new pitch as if they had always intended to go there. CAIRN's face brightened by meaningless degrees. Node aligned, focal point strengthened. "Child, we have their bones." The Imperial lances struck the empty space where the node had been. Energy shredded plasma, the star hissed. It was theatrics against a target that no longer existed in that orientation. Now, Cato breathed awe and terror, weighing the word down. Now Amina agreed. She raised her hand not because the motion mattered to machines, but because it mattered to people and brought it down on nothing, like a conductor who knew her orchestra would assemble the rest. The choir surged, the chord tightened. The focal point between belt and star went from suggestion to presence, a pressure you could have leaned a ladder against if ladders held in space. The Armada shields, already jittering, caught the full shape of the note. One of the carriers, crown shuddered. Its architecture had been a symbol on Hallis for so long that seeing it move shook something loose in every watcher. Shield light around it wrinkled like water pulled by two moons. Panels along its flight deck rippled and then tore with a neatness that would haunt designers' dreams. For a second, a person on the Vigilant Crown's service corridor could have put their hand through a wall and touched vacuum. In the tactical pit, that moment looked like a mutiny of math. Then the carrier's main shield collapsed in a ring, and as every rule of war demanded, physics got personal. Tug, graceless, and savage. On Guriel, some voices broke into laughter that was almost a sob. CAIRN did not scold. It was singing, too, in its way. "Escort Group Delta is folding," Cato shouted. "Their baselines can't hold." Two frigates spun out collision on the Imperatrix Admiral Duro, did not move for 3 seconds. They were the longest of his life. "Close ranks around the Vigilant Crown," he said at last, voice civilized again by force. "All batteries on that ring station. Kill the choir." Red lines converged on Guriel Brace. Amina said. She didn't duck. The first salvo hammered the ring, and the ring screamed, but held. Welds laid by miners who sang kept singing. A child in Bay 8 faltered. The woman beside him, who had never sung outside a shower, put her palm on the panel and matched him, raw and off-key and perfect. Hannah moved another boy to a quieter channel and lied to him gently that his ears would stop ringing soon. Orlov, sweating in an oven near a star, cranked a hand until his shoulders shook and laughed once because he was alive. Where no one sane should be, the Empire had brought a crown and a certainty. Humanity had brought a rusted ring and a song. Taught at a kitchen table, in the space between the forgotten force breathed and woke and stretched. On the holomap, the invincible fleet was no longer a clean diagram. It was a wound. "Hold," Amina said. Her voice was quiet and reached everyone. The wreckage of the halberd platform still glowed on Guriel's tactical screens, fragments spinning like shrapnel suns across the void. For a heartbeat, silence filled the ring, not because the people were cowed, but because no one knew how to absorb what they had just done. A fortress ship, the pride of the Empire's armada, had broken itself apart under the weight of a song. It was a sight so impossible that even those who had seen it with their own eyes struggled to believe. Then the silence shattered. Laughter broke through, first nervous, manic, half in shock. Cheers followed, rolling through the station in waves as voices redoubled in defiance. Miners stomped their boots on the decks. Children shrieked the melody off-key with fierce joy. Old men and women wept as they sang, knowing they might not live to see tomorrow, but finally tasting something sweeter than fear. The choir's resonance surged again, imperfect yet unstoppable, and every emitter in the mooring echoed it back with ancient patience. Amina Reyes stood in the middle of the ops pit, chest heaving, throat raw, and realized the truth. This was what Cairn had meant all along. The Empire could calculate, counter, and adapt to patterns, but not to humanity's refusal to be a pattern. Their hidden strength was not perfection, it was chaos given voice, imperfection made into a weapon. Every wrong note, every crack in the sound, Every defiant scream of someone who didn't care if they were on key became part of the resonance. It was a language no empire could predict, because it was born of pain, joy, and defiance, all tangled together, but strength never came without cost. Around her, Hannah and her medics pulled limp singers off panels, some with blood in their ears, others coughing red into their palms. The choir was killing them even as it saved them. Voices faltered. And yet, the song did not break. Whenever one voice fell, another filled the gaps, sometimes a child, sometimes a mother, sometimes an old man, too frail to walk but still strong enough to sing. The weapon demanded sacrifice, and humanity answered without hesitation. Far above, in the glare of the dwarf star, Suri and Orlov clung to life inside the tug percussion. The cockpit was an oven, warning klaxons shrieking as heat scorched through even the hard shields. Sweat poured from Suri's brow, stinging her eyes as she fought the thruster controls. Orlov's hands were locked on the actuator, bones trembling. With every fraction, he forced the polar node into alignment. They should have been dead minutes ago, but neither gave ground. When the node finally shifted again, CAIRN's calm voice whispered across, "There comes that resonance had increased. Another 20%. Suri laughed like a madwoman, breathless and shaking, while Orlov whispered something ancient and reverent about history demanding witnesses. On the Imperatrix, Admiral Kalduro's composure finally cracked. His fleet had been bred on the legend of invincibility, and now he saw that legend bleeding. His staff tried to hide their fear, but the whispers of collapse and resonance failure reached his ears all the same. Duro silenced them with a single glare, but he could not silence the truth. The Empire's perfection was fracturing, and the story he commanded, the story that had conquered half a galaxy, was unraveling, note by note. "Enough," he snarled. "Close ranks. Bring every battery to bear on that ring. If they want to, scream their defiance. We will burn their throats out of existence." The command echoed like a death sentence. The remaining halberd platforms adjusted course, their lances reorienting toward Guriel. Red lines swept across tactical halas, painting the station like a target. On Guriel, fear struck like cold water. The first cheer had faded into nervous murmurs. Families clutched each other, eyes locked on the screens. Everyone knew what those fortress lances could do, what they had already done to countless worlds. One shot could shear the ring in half. Two would turn Guriel into a drifting graveyard. For a heartbeat, voices faltered, the choir wobbling like a flame in a storm. Amina felt it instantly. She knew if the song broke now, all was lost. She climbed onto the dais in the center of ops, tore off her headset, and raised her raw, torn voice. She did not sing the mathematical sequence Karen demanded, nor the carefully rehearsed cadence drilled into them over the last frantic hours. She sang her grandmother's song, the one hummed in a small kitchen. Solder smoke curling in the air, a melody with no name, no perfection, just memory. The choir staggered, then caught it. One by one, the people followed. Mothers, children, minors, elders, they poured themselves into the melody, raw and furious, not caring about timing or pitch. It was imperfect, but it was human, and it was unstoppable. The resonance shifted, not cleaner, but deeper, broader. Karen's face flickered with something close to awe. "Yes," it whispered, "that they cannot model what is born from your flaws." The halberd that had locked onto Guriel's heart suddenly twisted in its own shield cocoon. The resonance tore through its harmonic lattice-like claws, through silk. One moment it was charging to fire. The next, its own energy cascaded inward. The fortress ship erupted in a storm of light, brighter than the star itself, as it annihilated itself in silence. The ring shook with the sound of its people roaring in triumph. The hidden strength of humanity's defiance, its imperfection, its refusal to break had broken another piece of the Empire's invincible fleet. Amina stood at the dais, throat on fire, tears streaking down her cheeks, and whispered into the chorus, "Louder. Always louder. Make them hear us." And they did. The ring groaned under the weight of exhaustion. Voices still carried the choir, but every note was strained, every cadence a battle. Amina knew the song would not hold much longer. Too many had fallen silent, their bodies giving out, even as their spirits refused. Every death left a hollow in the resonance, and though others filled it, the gaps multiplied like fractures in glass dot in the ops pit. Karen's voice broke through the chaos with unyielding calm. The shadow side emitter on Nader must be activated. Without it, collapse will remain uncertain. With it, probability exceeds threshold. The schematic lit up the moonlet's broken surface, marking the dormant node like a heartbeat under stone. Cato stared at the display in disbelief. That thing was never finished. Half its conduits are slag. Even if we reach it, it could fry. Whoever tries to wake it, we don't have a choice, Amina said. Her voice was ragged, but steady. If we stay here, we die singing. If we go there, maybe we live. The volunteers came before she could ask. Suri's voice crackled through the cum from the tug, defiant even through static. If there's a node that needs flying into hell, you know I'm in. Orlov, his old hands raw from the polar node's actuator, tapped his cane against the deck and said, "History isn't written by those who stayed behind. I'll go." Others followed, miners who knew Nader's tunnels from old salvage runs, engineers who swore they could coax dead machines into breathing again. The rust was patched and barely holding, but she had one more run in her. They loaded her with tools, makeshift explosives, and the kind of courage that tasted like fear swallowed whole. Amina strapped herself in at the command seat, refusing to send her people into fire without her. Suri grinned at her recklessness, but didn't argue. The launch from Guriel was silent. No cheers this time, just a quiet understanding that those leaving might not return. The choir kept singing, voices raw and imperfect, pushing the resonance as best they could. Their song followed the rust into the void like a tether of defiance. The Empire's drones were everywhere. Clouds of them swept the belt, searching for stragglers, hunting anything that moved. The rust flew low, hugging the debris, weaving through shattered ore rocks and the corpses of old freighters. Suri's hands guided her like a blade slipping between ribs, but even skill couldn't hide them forever. Warning klaxons screamed as the first drone cluster locked on. "Hold them off," Amina barked. The miners opened fire with jury-rigged cannons, sparks spraying into the black. Drones shattered, but more poured in, relentless and endless. The rust shuddered under the impact of glancing shots, plating peeling like bark. Suri cursed and drove her harder, engines screaming as they broke through the cloud and angled toward Nader's gray bulk. The moonlet loomed, its scarred surface marked by craters and broken structures. The Cassandra moorings, twin, lay half-buried here, skeletal frames of unfinished gantries jutting into the void like the ribs of a corpse. At its center, hidden in shadow, the dormant node waited, an ancient emitter sealed in silence. The rust landed rough, skidding across a fractured platform until her belly scraped sparks. The team spilled out into Nader's hollow tunnels, mag boots clanging against metal older than their parents'. The air was thin, stale, and cold enough to sting. Their lamps cut through dust motes that hadn't moved in centuries. The node was a cathedral of steel and silence, its veins folded like dead wings, its core pulsing faintly as if dreaming of power it had forgotten. Orlov limped forward, awe softening the hard lines of his face. "This was meant to be the strongest of them all," he whispered. The final voice in the choir. "Then let's wake it up," Amina said. The engineers swarmed the consoles, tearing off panels, rerouting conduits with sparks flying. Every cable groaned as if it resented being wrenched awake. Power flickered, stuttered, then faded again. "It's no good," one miner growled. "The regulators are fused. If we try to force it, the overload will take the whole node and us with it." Amina looked at CAIRN's schematic flickering on her wrist display. She thought of the voices still holding the choir together back on Guriel. She thought of Myra, the little girl with blood on her lips, still singing because she refused not to. "What if we don't regulate it?" she asked. The team froze. One of the engineers shook his head. "Without regulators, the current will kill whoever's inside the control chamber. It needs a conductor." Orlov's cane struck the floor. "Then it needs a volunteer." His voice was calm, steady, and absolute. "No," Amina snapped. "Not you, not anyone. We'll find another way." "There is no other way," Orlov said gently. His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw not the scholar, not the weary elder, but the man who had carried humanity's memory through decades of war. History demands its witnesses. If my life can give this weapon breath, then my death is worth it. Before she could stop him, he stepped into the chamber, his cane clattering behind him. He placed both hands on the dormant core and whispered words too quiet for anyone else to hear. Then he pressed his palms flat, and the chamber lit. Power roared through the node like a sleeping giant jolted awake. Sparks cascaded, panels screamed, and the entire structure shook as energy coursed through circuits untouched for centuries. The choir's song flared, the resonance doubling, then tripling, as the new voice joined. On Giriel, the singers gasped. As the power surged through their throats, strengthening their song beyond exhaustion, Orlov's body arched in the chamber, outlined by burning light. His mouth opened in a final soundless cry, then stilled. The core pulsed, steady and strong. The node was awake. Emitter aligned, Karen announced. Choir resonance at full capacity. Collapse. Amina's hands trembled. On her rifle, she wanted to weep, to scream, to pound her fists against the chamber doors. But she forced herself still because Orlov had chosen. His sacrifice was now part of the song, and she would not waste it. Back to the rust, she ordered, "We've got what we came for. Let's finish this." Behind them, the node thrummed with Orlov's final gift. Ahead of them, the armada still burned. The unlikely plan had worked, but its price was written in light and silence, and the Empire was about to hear the choir in full. RGY cascaded inward. The fortress ship erupted in a storm of light, brighter than the star itself, as it annihilated itself in silence. The ring shook with the sound of its people roaring in triumph. The hidden strength of humanity's defiance, its imperfection, its refusal to break, had broken another piece of the Empire's invincible fleet. Amina stood at the dais, throat on fire, tears streaking down her cheeks, and whispered into the chorus, louder, always louder. Make them hear us. And they did.